Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is Jeff Alpaugh of Jeff Alpaugh Custom. Creating the world's most dangerous shirts is nothing to be taken lightly. Now, putting on his first suit that truly fit was his defining moment, plus it also made him look and feel like James Bond. But his business education, combined with his military background and an incredible sense of style that has made him the successful entrepreneur that he is today. He wants his clients to be able to walk through a waterfall of compliments. Now, Jeff has always pushed the outer limits just to see what's on the other side. Jeff's contribution to Better the Pond was to provide masks for the school in his area, and not only to keep the kids safe, but also to make sure that they all felt equal. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Alpaugh. Jeff Alpaugh, I want to thank you ever so much for being a guest on my Better the Pond podcast. It is absolutely fantastic to have you as a guest.
Well, you know what? I thank you for having me. And I gotta say, I gotta thank you for wearing such an awesome shirt on this show. The fact that the shirt ties in with the paint in the background, like, you know, the coordination there really gets me excited as a fashionista. So thank you for starting us out on the right note here.
Oh, perfect. And, you know, here I see the white shirt, red buttons. I thought we might actually have a shirt off today, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, obviously I was afraid of your prowess, but actually I will show you. Now, I know a lot of people are listening, so they won't actually get the benefit. But one of the things I really like to do with my clothing is sometimes go classic, right? You can see the liner of my jacket is just wild and crazy. Go classic on the outside, but I don't know if you can see that the wild that I have under the hood here, right?
Nice.
So this is a great shirt because it's just a white shirt, except for you can see my cuff has a big rose on it. But the minute I take my jacket off, right? People are like, yeah, it's party time. Right?
What?
We call that the wedding crasher shirt. So if you ever need to, all my white shirts, when you see me in a suit, if I'm wearing a white shirt, it's only a white shirt by day. At night, I've got some awesome artwork on the back. And this is how I do it.
What's under the hood? I absolutely love it. So, you know, I've been a collector of Robert Graham, and seeing that and seeing the inside of that jacket, you might have me swayed.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm a big fan of Robert Graham. I absolutely love him as a designer. Obviously, you could tell he's one of my inspirations. But of course, many a Robert Graham fan ends up in my store on my website, ensnared because of how awesome the designs are.
And most dangerous.
You better believe it.
And the most dangerous shirts. That is something to hang on to.
Yeah.
I'm swayed. I have a feeling that we're going to do some work together.
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, it's kind of funny. We were talking about a mutual friend of ours, Jim Gilbert, before the call. And Jim's thing is he's the most huggable car dealer. And I'll never forget when Jim Gilbert first came into my store. And store is probably a generous term. I was actually above this restaurant. It was called the Cinnamon Cafe, or it still is called the Cinnamon Cafe. And the smell from the food was so potent, it got into everything, including shirts. So, and it was this sort of pop-up store I'd established. I think I had this place for about 3 weeks. Prior to that, I'd been just running out of my condo for almost a year. And I would look at these buses that had Jim Gilbert's deck all over them, and I think one day I got to get this guy into my store. And then it wasn't even that difficult. He actually called me on my phone and was like, "Hey, is this Jeff Alpaugh?" I was like, "Yeah, who's this?" He's like, "Jim Gilbert." I was like, "How does Jim Gilbert have my cell phone number?" Okay. And he's like, "I need an appointment for next week." So okay, great. Anyways, but you know, he was like, "You know, I like what you did with the dangerous thing." I was like, well, yeah, of course you like it. It's like what you did with the huggable thing. And he's like, "Yeah, it is the same thing." I was like, yeah, it is the same thing. Right. So it was kind of funny. It was the exact same strategy. You didn't really recognize it, but I guess it came so long ago. It was like, you know, and a lot of people have asked me, like, how did you come up with the dangerous? How did you come up with the dangerous thing? Like, people think that I like maybe took out a big graph, you know, 4x4. Okay. Like, I took all these marketing things, maybe pulled a bunch of people. No, I just saw a guy once, like way back in the day, had this super cool shirt on. I was like, dude, that is a dangerous shirt. Like, where do you get it? And then it kind of stuck in my mind. I'm like, man, if I ever make shirts, they're going to be the world's most dangerous shirts. They're going to be like this guy's shirts, but more dangerous. And that's sort of how that came about.
Isn't it funny, how those things come about? Is just off a happenstance conversation, with my, so I have the duck, duck, goose thing. You have the dangerous thing. Jim Gilbert's got the huggable thing. And, mine was out of a conversation in a coffee shop about being a misfit. And it was just, all of a sudden, just one conversation and everything changes. It's super cool.
Totally.
So let's get rock and rolling with this.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I want to know what got you from being a gosling, a youngin', right, to leaving the nest to where you are today, making the world's most dangerous shirts. What's your backstory, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm going to try to tell this in a manner that is interesting and accurate, and yet a little bit condensed, because I can be fairly verbose, and I do like telling all the details. But the Coles Notes is, and I will start right at the start, right? And I've told this, I kind of travel places. I tell people sort of my story, but I kind of usually skip the beginning part. But I'll kind of go over the whole timeline, because I think that's something that your listeners, particularly, are a little bit more interested in. Is really the entire development.
Absolutely.
And for me, I when I was 15 years old, my mom gave me this book for Christmas, and the book was called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is actually a very famous book in sort of the business community, and it's like a pop biz book. So everyone, yeah, exactly. And that Mr. Kiyosaki presents these sort of 4 quadrants: 1 quadrant, 2 quadrant, 3 quadrant, 4, and they are employee, self-employed, entrepreneur, and investor. Ideally, you'd like to be guy in number 4, the investor, for all these reasons he states. But really, you're only going to get there if you can successfully be number 3, unless you're already sort of born with a lot of resources. I read this book and it made a lot of sense to me. And I was like, man, this guy knows what he's talking about. So, well, how do I be a number 3 quadrant guy, which was an entrepreneur? I'm not even sure he used that word, but I knew I wanted to be a quadrant 3 guy. Well, how do I do that? So, I thought I better go to business school. So I went to business school at Wilfrid Laurier. I didn't really realize that business school kind of trains you to be like an executive at a huge company. It's more like training you to be like in the officer stream at like IBM, not how to start your own company. So that was on me for not doing my research. But I ended up at business school learning how to be an executive at a massive corporation and not how to start my own company, which is why I wanted to go there. And then, I went to school between 2003 and 2007. So if you'll recall, that's when the Afghanistan campaign was on television all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that if, this campaign was still on, right at that time we were calling it a war, right? If this war was still on, then when I graduated, that I would enlist. And in fact, it was. So I enlisted in the military. What was interesting is I thought it was going to be like, you're like, hey, I'm ready to roll. And they're like, helmet on, back a truck, let's go, right? See your family in 3 years kind of thing. And instead, they were like, yeah, okay, like, looks great. Do you want to be an officer? I was like, what's that? They're like, oh, it's like, you get to be like a leader and you're super awesome. And like, you'll be like an LT. And I was like, sure, I'll take that. They're like, okay, great. Like, that'll take a year. And I was like, okay, like, it will be shorter if I don't be an officer. It's like, no, that'll still take about a year. So I was like, I thought we were at war. Like, it's going to take a year, right? Like, it was just so crazy. And so, okay, fine. So I was like, okay, I guess I wait a year. Back up a little bit. While I'm in business school, I had to get what's called a co-op job, right? This means you have to get a job in the field that you're studying in, right? So there's a work and a study component. And I was really excited about it because I would have to go to physical interviews for these jobs, and I was going to get a suit. That was part of the process of going to these interviews. And I thought that when I got my suit, I would look like James Bond. Well, unfortunately, I went to the store with my dad, who's not a fashionista, and I got a suit that was like 5 sizes too big for me. For guys who don't wear suits or don't wear blazers, but are listening to this podcast, that'd be like, I weighed about 145 pounds at the time, okay? And I had a suit on for a guy who was like 220, 230. Okay. It was ridiculous. So I looked like a clown going to these interviews. And needless to say, I didn't get a co-op job, right? I went to many interviews, like 5-0, not 1-5, 5-0 interviews. And I didn't get a job. And my mom actually, once again, called a family friend and got me a co-op job. But I, felt a deep sense of shame due to not getting a job the proper way. And I went to a store called Harry Rosen, which, for viewers who are not familiar with, very high-end menswear chain in our country, in Canada. And I was like, hey, I was like, I got to learn about dressing. And I don't know, I think I was like, I need to learn about speaking. I need to learn about, I don't know, anything, right? Like why does everybody else get a job first, second, third time? I go to 50 interviews, I don't get one job. Like something's clearly wrong with me. And it wasn't like maybe something's wrong with me. It was like, there was like huge sirens being like, something's super wrong with you, man. And if you don't figure it out, like you're not going to survive, like the evolutionary, like blinkers were like, dude, like you were about to get destroyed out there. So I went to a store called Avery Rose. I was like, what do you got to do to get a job here? And these guys were like, dude, you look terrible. Like there's no way you're getting a job here. So I was like, okay, fair enough. So then I went to a store called Moore's. And everybody, I think, knows what Moore's is, big menswear chain. And I was like, hey, what do you got to do to get a job here? And the guy was like, dude, you look terrible, but you're going to come in early tomorrow and you're going to start tomorrow and we're going to put you in a proper suit. So the guy puts me in a proper suit. I'll try not to belabor the point, but a life-altering, life-changing experience for me, right? So the thing is that when I went and got this first suit with my dad, I looked in the mirror and instead of seeing James Bond, I saw a total dork. And I was like, dude, I got a suit. I'm supposed to look like Bond. How come I look like a dork? The guy's like, because you're a dork. And so take this suit. And he hard sells me into the wrong suit. I'm in Moore's. The guy, I look in the mirror, boom, 007. You see what I'm saying?
You pulled off the 007.
In my own mind, for sure. Okay. So I was like, dude, this is awesome. And it was like very transformative. I felt more confident. And because I felt like I just looked so good and professional, I just wanted to tell more people about it. I would like evangelize on wearing well-fitting, proper, formal attire. And, I was hired at Morris to like fold clothes, right? Vacuum the floor, clean the mirrors. And when a customer came in, I would like just rush the door and like just start like, hey, what do you got, an event? Oh, you got a wedding? Oh man, well maybe we'll get you a suit like this, right? And like, ask him questions, trying to figure out his needs. Then I'd like kind of teach him how to tie a tie and stuff. Like they couldn't stop me. And eventually, people would be like, "Yo, look at this Jeff guy. Like I gotta be this Jeff guy, right?" So it was good for my ego. It was good for management. Everybody liked it. And then one day I graduated. Told you the story I just told you about the military. It was going to take a year. So I thought, well, if I go get kind of like a business on Bay Street, a Bay Street type business grad job, I'll probably not want to go back to the Army then a year later. I'll be sort of set in my career. So but I was really loving everything I was learning about clothing, especially the psychological effects that it had on people and the transformative qualities. So I went back to Harry Rosen and I was wearing a well-fitting suit. And I said, hey, what do you got to do to get a job here? And these guys actually remembered me from a couple of years back. And they're like, you were here? Like, oh, yeah, that's me. They're like, come on, we talk to the manager, right? And the man, it was actually the same thing as Moore's. He was like, you start tomorrow. So like, right, did an interview on the spot type thing, started the next day, and it was great. The training there was absolutely fantastic, both on product and actually on sales and psychology. So it was just a really great experience for me, and I really enjoyed everything I was learning. And then the Army called. And I had all these kind of expectations. It was very different. I thought the Army was going to like suck. It was actually the most fun thing ever. Like I thought I'd stay for like 2 or 3 years and go to Afghanistan and then come back. I actually, unfortunately, missed the Afghanistan campaign, and I ended up staying for 10 years because it was so awesome. Like, yeah, like it was just such a great experience and really good for me, I'd say, in my development. And I got a lot of my, I guess, notions on sort of like leadership and management and sort of like upright living from the military. But while I was in the military, it was easy to see that the landscape of clothing was changing drastically, and I sort of wanted to be a part of it. And you could see that we were going to, for instance, the shirt that you're wearing today, right? Maybe 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been appropriate in some of the settings that you wear it in. But now it's great. It has a collar on it. It suggests that you're ready for business, but it also demonstrates that you're a rebel, you're a rogue, you're an odd duck. It's super awesome. And in fact, it gets you more leads, more attraction, more conversation, more fun than any white shirt would any day. You know it. Everybody knows it. It's brilliant. And you could see that it was going that way. Like people were, while I was in the Army, people were starting to get maybe a white shirt or a blue shirt that had the pattern of your whole shirt under the cuff. Right. You remember, right? Yeah. And it was like, oh, dude, like you see a shirt like that in Harry Rosen. We were selling those for like $400 a pop, like crazy. And the whole time I was at Harry Rosen, I'm like, dude, why don't we just sell the guy? Like, why don't you just make that pattern the whole shirt? That's what he wants. The guy's going to a networking event. He's going to stand around. Everyone's going to be like, how's the weather? Oh, the weather's great. Still cheering for Blue Jays? Obviously. Like, dude, he wants somebody to be like, dude, that's a big shirt. Where'd you get it? I got it here, right? Like, he wants to break that wall of awkward and boring. He wants to have fun. So let's make the shirts work for the people, right? And we were going into such a business casual environment, which was super cool for fashionistas, a little intimidating for people who just want to put on the black suit, white shirt, black tie, and go to work, right? They're like, oh, dude, you gotta know what you're doing in this new sort of fashionista realm. But anyways, I could see the real opportunity. And then there was another opportunity, and it was in custom, right? People wanted clothing that fit, right? You watch television shows from the 90s, you can see that everybody's sort of swimming in their fabric, right? You look what I'm wearing now, like I don't have a slim fit shirt on, okay, because I want to breathe, I move, I'm very active, but it fits me well, it looks great, right? And I think a lot of people, I could tell that a lot of people were expecting their clothing to fit better and sort of demanding that now. And we were going to this business casual approach, and I happen to be a little bit of a wild and crazy guy who likes very flamboyant clothing and very well tailored clothing. So, I had sort of some of these ideas, and then I saw a company called Indochino come out. I don't know if you're familiar with Indochino, but so actually very fascinating story. 2 UBC students, okay, so Canadians, great. 2 UBC students. One of them is like, I think his like uncle or something owned a factory somewhere in China. So they had like a direct line, right? And they had a family connection there. And they were both computer science students. Okay, you guys knew nothing about clothing. And what they were doing was they were offering people white and blue dress shirts that fit, right? It was like, you go to them, you punch in your measurements on their website. So they're talking with a website direct to consumer, and then they're talking to their supplier, direct to the supplier. Remember that even 10 years previous to this, 5 years, 2 years previous to these guys, you'd have to find a factory, you'd have to create a whole line, get it on a runway in Milan, and then get it out to stores. That's millions of dollars to start a clothing company, right?
Right.
At least one that was going to then have other growth. I mean, you could have started in like an independent boutique that carried other brands, but to have your own brand be a major investment. And these guys just like, in my mind, they just smashed the wall down. And obviously a lot of other people thought so too, because the next year there was more companies like that, and then more companies. And what I noticed when I would Google search custom shirts is you go to the About Us or My Story section on their websites, and guess what? There was no story. It was almost everyone was 2 computer science students. None of them knew anything about clothing. They all knew about tech. They were tech guys. Right. And I agree that everything has to be tech driven now, but I just kept looking at it and seeing like, you know what, the future is online custom clothing. For sure it is. For sure it is. And yet every single one of these companies is being led by tech guys. Not one of these guys has any interest or background in clothing. Not one of them even worked on the front line of a clothing store.
Isn't that fascinating?
Think about how crazy at it.
It's absolutely fascinating.
Think about crazy.
Yeah. So I need to take you back for a second here, Jeff.
And I'm like in the woods, like walking around, like just thinking like, dude, like everybody might get one thing, one moment, one pitch, and this is probably mine. Like whoever dominates online custom clothing is not going to be a tech guy. Imagine if all the restaurants were started by tech guys.
Right.
No, like the leader has to be a clothing guy enabled by tech. Tech is an enabling activity, not a leading activity. So I, one day I was just like, all right, I'm gonna be that guy. Somebody's got to get out there and just grab that crown, and it may as well be me because I don't see anybody else doing it, right? And then so I started the company, and then I could walk through. I'll walk through that sort of very quickly, and if you want to ask other questions, I know I've been talking a long time about the background. you
Yeah,
know.
but I do want to take you back just a little bit, because
Sure.
one of the things that's really been fascinating with the guests that I've had, there's been a pattern when when they've been younger, and there were certain moments in their life that sort of defined them.
Yeah.
And I listened to your story, which is really fascinating, Jeff. I mean, you're from Fredericton, New Brunswick, so you're out, and you're originally from there, I presume.
I'm not actually. So I'll give you some context there. I've had a bit of a nomadic life. Born in Toronto, raised in a combination of Toronto and Vancouver, and kind of like moved to Vancouver, then moved back to Toronto type thing.
Right.
And then I went to Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. Then I joined the Army, which took me obviously just for a few months to Quebec, and then here in Fredericton for just over a year. Then Edmonton for 5 years, and then back here for 4 years. And while I was here on my first military stint in Fredericton, I sort of realized like there was just something about the size of the place that really resonated with me, and just like I guess like just the way people interacted with each other, right? A lot of my basis was, you hear Toronto, Vancouver, Edmonton, right? All sort of bigger cities, whereas Fredericton sort of seemed to still have a community aspect to it, and yet it has, like, I mean, the hospitals here, there's a university here, right? Like in Fredericton, in New Brunswick, Fredericton is 60,000 people, and that is the capital, the heart city. We know in Ontario or Alberta or BC, a town with 60,000 people is like a feeder town with like a friggin' motel for truckers to sleep in as they go to like an actual place, right? So I just really like the vibe, and maybe with moving a couple times and then being in these big cities, I maybe really didn't, and then the Army, I never had that kind of like flag rooted feeling part of a community, which I was able to kind of feel fairly quickly here in Fredericton. So I ended up planting the flag here, and we did start the company here.
Absolutely. So that's interesting, so here you got a bit of a nomadic life. You've been all over the place,
Yeah.
And you go back, so take it back to being a kid and whatnot. And the story is fascinating because there's this link of fashion that sort of that weaves through, but then you got this whole military piece,
Yeah.
and business school, right? We're trying to connect the dots here, right? So
Yeah.
I have to ask the question, if you go back to your backstory, if you look back, was there a defining moment when it came to fashion design, or that even that bit when you put the 007 suit on, of how it just boom, it changed everything? Was there a defining moment when you were young that actually led to where you are now?
That's a great question. So it actually, I wish I had another one in the back pocket, but actually it really is that moment where I put on that well-fitting suit in Moores, right? And I guess I would have been 19 or 20 at the time. It's hard for me to totally remember, but around that age. And what I noticed, even just in myself, right, kind of like standing a little straighter, speaking a little bit more clearly, looking people directly in the eye. And I can explain it very easily now, but I couldn't at the time. But as I was experiencing that virtuous loop, right, because life is either a vicious circle or a virtuous circle, but there is no like straight line, right? It's either you go places and you kind of look like $1 million and you look intelligent, enthusiastic, and a source of authority, and people treat you like that. So then you start acting like that, right? Or you look the opposite of those things, so people suddenly treat you like that, and then you start to believe it, right? Like there's this or there's that, but there's no like you're just standing still. And I started to see a couple things. Actually, one thing that's super interesting, I remember I was at, name drop this, I'm not trying to be that guy, but I was at U.S. Army Ranger School, which was like super badass. And, I remember one of the first days, one of the sergeants said, he's like, you need to understand that like the U.S. military is only about one thing, and that is setting the conditions. Like the only thing the military does is set the conditions for success. And he expounded on it a little bit, but he explained like that's the only thing that we teach here. And I then kind of realized that like, why do we? I mean, most people, if you look in their closet, they have like one part that costs like 10 times what the rest of their closet costs, right?
Right.
And we all have that. And I kind of realized that like that's that's what we're doing with clothing, right? Is we're setting the conditions for success, right? The minute you walk into the meeting, the minute you walk into a room, either all eyes are on you, or everyone's taking you seriously, or you just look like you have it together, or you quote get it, right?
Right.
And when in that moment, when I saw myself in the mirror, I realized that there was what I would call like a transformational quality, right? The same guy who was a slouching kind of slacker, became a lot more like, I'd say my attitude and mentality became a lot more type A after putting on that suit than previously in my own life, right? And I mean, we all know it, right? There's some people who they wake up in the morning and, you know, they've got their own like office in their house, they've got a gym in their house, they've got a motivational poster, right? They put on good clothes and everything just like fires up on the right way, and it sets the conditions for the day. So that was the moment. And I think what I learned before it was designed, before anything, it was fit, right? And it was like, if you have well-fitting, tailored clothes, you feel a certain way, you act a certain way, and people respond to you a certain way, and things go better. The so what is that we would have to give a lot of oral presentations in business school. And I wasn't really one of those guys who was like picked to give the presentation. But once I had the slick suits, I was always the guy that like, Jeff's giving the presentation, which was also super awesome because all of a sudden I became good at presentations, which would serve me well now, serves me extremely well now. But also, I didn't have to do as much work, right? It was like, oh, okay, I look good in a suit. And because I'm wearing a suit, I feel like I should enunciate more, so I do. So now I don't have to really do that much work, but I always get a good grade. Dude, setting the conditions. It's awesome.
Can I quote Jeff Alpaugh?
Go nuts. Even if it's against me, we'll see what happens.
Think about it. Be about it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's my two-part success formula. You've obviously caught on to it, so I love it.
Think about it, be about it, right? That's what you're saying, right? If I was to summarize that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this is going to lead me to my next question with you, Jeff, is, you know, I believe that we're all odd ducks. I believe that we're all misfits, right? Can you tell me about a time in your life when you didn't fit in and then it was different, but you stood out, right? And that could be either from a negative or a positive.
I'll try. Yeah. Dude, I'm not like, to folks who are listening, it's like I'm thinking. Like I'm not trying to think of one. I'm certainly trying to think of which one. So don't worry. I'll have something for you. I will say, it actually probably took me a while to even realize I was an odd duck. I think I was one of those people. Like obviously, you can imagine anyone who sees me in videos now or sees my stuff. You know, a lot of people ask me like, "So you were in the military?" Like, yeah, oh yeah. It's like the actual army? Like, yeah. Like, well, how did they let you in? You know, because obviously I am not a natural conformist, I guess, right?
Right.
But it is. I'm trying to think of like an exact incident, but I can remember even early in my military career. By early, I mean only 3 or 4 years in, and I was talking with a bunch of my friends, my fellow Army buddies, and we actually all lived together. It was brilliant, and I'm sure we were drinking because that was something we did often in those days. And you know, someone was saying something about, you know, we kind of tease each other. So I was saying something about me, and they're like, yeah, well, like, you know, and I used to get in a lot of trouble in the Army. Like it was actually insane. Like and it'd always be kind of like, you know, like, how does this happen? Like, like, even if a lot of people are doing something, like, I'd always be the guy who got caught. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd be like, oh, there's 10 guys there. We don't know who they are, but we know Jeff was there, right? And I'd be like, yeah, that's what's always happened to me. And I remember one of the guys being like, well, you just don't fit in the mold. And I was kind of like, what mold are you talking about? They're like, you know, there's just kind of a mold, and you just don't fit into it at all. And I was like, oh, really? That seems super weird. And then I remember even being actually in the U.S. Army, and then being like, I remember 2 guys were like kind of a few people back from me were talking, which they should have been talking bad discipline. But they're like, yo, that Canadian guy just does whatever the hell he wants. And I was like, they can't be talking about me. Like, I have perfect military discipline. You know what I mean? But like, I was the only Canadian guy there, so they must have been, right? So I would get these snippets, and then I think as I got a little bit older, I just kind of embraced it. And that's, you know, with the dangerous dress shirt thing, I was like, you know what, like, I am a certain way, and I'm not ashamed of it. And you know what? I just want to like scream like this is what I'm doing. And now on social, we're so active on social media, but I was very lucky. I started this company in 2016 when like you could put out a video on social media and it would just go. Like it would just get like everybody would see it, right? And I put out all these crazy videos that were just like me talking to the camera, but just being completely nuts about how important it was to wear these awesome dress shirts. And it just like ripped around like you can't believe. And at that moment I knew, I was like, man, I am just a little bit different than other folks. You know?
Well, it's fascinating. A guy like yourself, right? Total nonconformist. You're obviously outside of the box, right? And yet somewhere in there, you weave yourself into the military, which is total conformity. How did you even for yourself in your own mind manage to put those two together? Because they're to me, they're opposites.
There are opposites, but you know, it was actually great for me the way I looked at it. Like I really did need a lot more discipline in my life at the time. Anyways, I didn't really join for discipline or like self-help or anything. I joined to like, you know, contribute to my nation, which is in war. But I could certainly see that, you know, where I was at, I could definitely use a heavy dose of discipline. And in fact, it was pretty obvious that I needed a lot more discipline than I did a lot more time to express myself. You know, so I think on some level, I kind of just realized that, you know, buying into the program, as much as I was, I guess, you know, genetically able to, would in fact be a good thing and serve me in sort of positive ways going forward.
And how's that served you now? Looking back at what you learned in the military and having discipline and rules and those kind of things, how's that advanced you as far just even from a business perspective?
I think so. You know, in my, like I'm talking to you about it because I'm here talking about my story. In my, you know, branding and stuff like that, I don't really include the military. Sometimes I include Easter eggs that, you know, people in the military be like, oh, I wonder if this guy was in the military before, right? Like that type of thing. But I don't, it's not like a lot of, you know, what they call veterpreneurs will really have that as a big focus of their brand, and nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I kind of wanted to feel like, you know, could I take the tools I learned in the military and apply them and see success from that, as opposed to being like, you know, can I just lean on the military's brand? I sort of wanted to have my own brand, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I do think that I have a brand that, you know, even if I'd never been in the military, it'd be the same. I'm sure it wouldn't be the exact same, but you know what I mean? It'd be similar. And would stand on its own two legs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I wasn't going from the fact of the brand. I was going from the lessons learned.
No, exactly. So same page. But I do think that what I'm trying to say, I do think that I did get a lot from the lessons learned. I think I got, you know, the discipline obviously is the foundation. But a lot of people don't realize, like, the military is, you know, does three things, right? Shoot, move, communicate. That's what we do. And you know, we don't do much shooting at the dangerous. We do a lot of move and communicate, right? And the idea is essentially coordinating activity, right? The military does give you a great communication style, right? Most people think very big to small, and yet if you notice, most people do not speak big to small, right? So the military really teaches you how to communicate a plan, and that plan could be as small as helping somebody buy a shirt, or it could be communicating a complex business plan to anyone from your actual troops to people you're trying to get excited, to bankers, to whoever, right? So it really does teach you a lot of really great communication strategies, and it teaches you a lot of planning, okay? Business takes a lot of planning. Although you learn planning in business school, the military teaches you how to make very simple and very effective plans, and how to think about analyzing multiple factors and then turn it into a plan. And it also gives you a mindset around those two things, right? I find that a lot of people, and I was like this, like after business school, it's like you're taught these like case studies and how to plan for this and da-da-da, and how to do all this nonsense. And you get kind of lost in it, right? The military teaches like simplicity in a really positive way. It's like, yo, you're gonna come up with a plan, but at the end of the day, the plan is gonna be like smash, right? But like, you're gonna come up with a plan, you're going to make the plan, and then here's how you're going to communicate the plan. And then just remember that a great plan tomorrow is not as good as an okay plan today. So let's get moving, right? And I think you kind of take those three things, right, to sort of, bias towards action, the ability to come up with simple plans that do encompass all the factors, and the ability to communicate simple plans in a simple and effective manner across the board, allows you to coordinate a lot of activities.
Right. Which is a skill is amazing in business, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we can have all sorts of plans, but those plans can change. So I think the Army can teach you how to shuck and jive within that, right?
Yes.
To be able to move, right?
Exactly.
Which is a great skill. Which leads me into my next question for you, Jeff, is what is your superpower? What makes you awesome? And this isn't about bragging. This isn't about your ego, right? This is about who you are, right? And your contribution to the world.
Yeah, totally. Well, I don't know about my contribution to the world. I will say, I remember when I was younger, I was going to write a book called ADHD, or ADD is a superpower, and I think somebody already did that and beat me to the punch, but which is super annoying. But I would say, like most, I guess, like ADD types, which I am, I, have a need to always be doing something, right? And so I always have a need to be doing something, and I always have a need to see what will happen if we push it just a little bit further, right? And so I think that might be my superpower, is that I guess I have a lot of energy, and I always want to know what's going to happen if we just go a little bit further than we are today, right? I have this sort of intense curiosity, and being a bit curious about that, and with the energy. I will say another thing that I think helps me, right? I don't want to be like, oh, superpower. Let me tell you 3 superpowers, but I think one thing that helps me, and I would just encourage in a lot of people, the one thing that I see that holds so many people back, in my opinion, and I don't mean in terms of finance or career necessarily, is this like love of respectability that we really have today, And when I first started, like, I would go to stuff, like, I remember one guy came and he bought a shirt from me, and he's like, the reason I'm buying a shirt from you is because I saw you standing with a rack of clothes at a local boxing event. Imagine trying to sell a bunch of fancy shirts at a local boxing event in freaking New Brunswick. Okay, everyone is like huge thing of dip, wearing obviously the same plaid thing they all got from Artwork Warehouse. Nobody wants it. People are calling me homosexual slurs. It's like, but it's like the type of stuff that entrepreneurs, put up with and don't even really care that much about, because, I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm just trying to see what's going to happen. I'm curious. I'm curious more than I'm a lot more curious than I am socially embarrassed. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a big thing. Like, if you actually, like, you have to put a lot on the line to be an entrepreneur. And certainly the for most people, it's kind of like how they say, like, public speaking is scarier than death. Yeah. Like, I think most people, if you actually, like, everyone talks about starting a business. Freaking everybody does. Okay. Not even some people, like, literally everybody thinks they have a good business idea. Everyone talks about doing it. Like, oh, there's a lot of risk. It's hard. It's a lot of work. It is a ton of financial risk, and it is a ton of work. But I think the real thing that stops people is people are scared. They're like, yeah, what if I did it and then I failed and I wasn't as far ahead of my career, or I looked like a loser? Do you know what I mean? Yep. And I think just like taking respectability and throwing that in the garbage is a really important tool for folks who are listening to this podcast. And I think that people who are listening to this podcast are probably ready to embrace that. I mean, they've probably already admitted they're odd ducks, or at least fascinated by odd ducks. And I would say, probably the most important superpower for an odd duck is to remember this whole notion of respectability. These people who you are worried about looking respectable in front of, like, if you called them and asked them for a ride to the airport, they wouldn't give it to you anyway. True. They don't care about you. Like, so why do you care? You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that kind of goes back to your point too about, pushing the limits and pushing the edge. What'll happen, right? If we just push. And I agree with you wholeheartedly when we talk about ADD and ADHD as being a dysfunction. That's kind of where the label comes in. And actually, when I speak, I talk about it a fair amount, right? I mean, it is a superpower, and it is such a gift. And I think anybody listening to us to understand that, because you know, when you kind of downplayed when I say your contribution to the world, Jeff, I see it differently, because just like your energy, your skill, the things that you put out there, you make the suit for somebody, right? They stand up, they look in the mirror, they change their energy.
Oh yeah, no,
right?
there's a lot
Now
of that.
they've affected
Right?
somebody else down the road. It is much bigger. It's a ripple effect that goes out for sure, absolutely for sure, right? So it is a contribution to the world in my eyes.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, that is an interesting point on my thing. I will say, one thing that was super important to me when I started business, even if I wasn't going to start a clothing business, right? Let's say for some reason today we had to start a business and we weren't allowed to be in clothing because it's like, you can't do what you've already done, or I don't know, like there's crazy rules of the game. For me, what would be super important is that, you know, when people interact with my business, it is as transformative as it was for me that day standing in front of that mirror, right? When I put on the 007 suit, right? So, and that's like when you said, like, what is the moment? Well, that is the moment. And that's what I often do tell people when I was kind of like, okay, when I was first thinking about, like, I knew I wanted to start my own business just because I knew a lot about clothes. It didn't necessarily mean it was going to be in clothing, but I knew, this is what I always tell people. I knew that when people interacted with it, they had to have that same transformative impact as when I put on that suit, right? And that's important because it takes a lot of things off the table, right? What the quote easiest businesses to start these days are, you know, things that are not good for your health, right? Like alcohol, cigarettes, fast food, right?
Yeah.
You want to get rich, start something like that, right? But that isn't really that isn't really. And I'm not, like, obviously if buddies who own those types of business, I'm not trying to, you know, hate on them, but it wouldn't be for me, right? I want, you know, them embracing with my business. The more they embrace with it, the more led to positive outcomes in their life, more led to happiness, the more led to prosperity. As opposed to the other way. And I also just wouldn't be a great, like, funeral home guy. You know, I wanted people like I understand it's a very valuable service. It needs to happen, and there's a way to do it that is just so great for people and their family. But when people come to me, it's all about high fives and fist bumps, and that's how it's going to be.
It's dangerous.
That's right. It is very positive. And
there's no danger in the funeral business. So
no.
So, hey Jeff, can you tell me about a time in your life when someone did something for you that left an impact, that left a mark?
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll you know, at the risk of being lame, I would suggest this. You know, I have fantastic parents. Really, really, I do. And it is funny, you know, as I was looking at your questions and sort of reflecting on them, you know, I actually didn't really have an answer to this, only because it was one of those things where I actually had like 20 answers. You know, I was like, oh, like a lot. I think I've had a lot of good fortune. And I will say that, you know, when I do ultimately write the book, Think About It, Be About It, which will be a great book, I will ensure that people know how lucky I have been throughout, because I'm telling you, I've had a lot of good luck. And I think that is a really deciding factor. I think anybody who sort of makes it in the entrepreneurial world, like, it is a rough seas, and you do need a lot of luck. But one of the lucky things I've had is that a lot of people have done a lot of good things for me. But it really has started with my parents, right? I didn't mean to answer those questions in a way that aligns with this one, but you even saw, like, you know, I could have been kicked out of the co-op program because I couldn't get a job interview, right? But I didn't ask my mom, whatever. But my mom was like, hey, you know what? I've called a family friend. I've called this guy. He's going to interview you. Like, just go to the interview type thing, arrange it. And then I still stayed in the co-op program, right?
Right.
What if I had been booted out of the co-op program and I was like, I hate business, and threw up my hands? I mean, that easily could have been an alternative, right? Yes, my mom did get me that business book at 15, but, you know, she had to think, like, hey, you know what? Like, this is a book that might push them in a really good and interesting direction, right? So she really set the conditions there, right? And then my father, I speak with my father once a week, and just kind of tell him what's going on with the business, and he advises, right? And it's not because he's Mr. Business Expert or business advisor, but there's a lot of dynamics at play in a business and starting a business, and, you know, being able to have a sounding board with somebody who you trust very deeply and implicitly, you know, really goes a long way. And not everybody has that. So a couple incidents from, you know, my own mom, which have had huge, obviously, impacts, as you can see, right? And then my dad on the sort of consistent and constant impacts.
Mm-hmm. And being in business as well, and that I understand that you also there's those other people around you that you need to be able to have sounding boards. Like it is really it's a tough gig going solo in your own mind, being an entrepreneur, and you need other people to brainstorm off of or throw ideas out, and those sounding boards with people that you trust implicitly to to be there when you need them, because we're all in it together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a great story. It's interesting. So I look at this, Jeff, and I say, with your mom getting you, the gig and whatnot, right? And you said, well, is it luck, right? Either you've had a lot of luck, and I'll question that. Is it luck, right, or was it just your path?
Right. Yeah, right now I chalk it up to. I chalk it up to good fortune on a lot of things. I'm sure it's a combination of fate, God's providence, and chance and luck. But obviously, there's been a lot of times where I've gotten lucky, and I've capitalized on that luck. Right, like there are people who get lucky every day, and because their eyes are closed, they would have no idea. They in fact tell you that they were unlucky. Right, even though it's like, dude, there's $1 billion sitting right beside you. Like, what are you doing? Right. I will say though, I am lucky to have been raised in a household where, identifying opportunity and maximizing whatever you have or don't have was sort of taught as a value.
Right. So, which leads me to my next question. Well, I tell you, you're the king of the segue. So, with that, right? What your backstory? You got your parents. You've got luck. You got everything that's going on around you, right? And with that, what are you doing presently right now to better the pond? And my bigger question to that too is, why are you doing it?
We've done something recently that is a big check mark in the philanthropic box. I specifically haven't done I'm a very active guy on social media and stuff like that. I'm kind of one of those guys who sort of believes like if you do good deeds just to brag about them, like does that really count? Right. So I'll keep it pretty vague, but we did I'll say partnered with the New Brunswick Education Board recently and did something pretty cool, and it was super awesome. And the reason we did that is because it was one of those things that kind of levels the playing field financially for folks. So if, certain kids can afford something, then they would still get, you know what I mean? And one thing, I absolutely love clothing. I absolutely love fashion. But I will say, the one thing that is too bad about it is, it can really expose, like obviously people who are wealthier and better off can afford nicer clothes, right? Mm-hmm. And that's too bad because it really shouldn't be about that.
Correct.
Right. So we did something that was kind of cool that kind of levels that playing field a little bit in the New Brunswick school system. And I just like it because I love children. By the way, I have 2 children. When I was a younger man, I used to like teach children at camps and stuff like that. So I absolutely love children, and I love really anything where you can kind of like help someone spark. You know what I mean? Because I feel like when people are at a young age, it's so easy for them to get discouraged, and actually, for people to kind of have, I think, like really rewarding and fulfilled lives, really not much needs to happen other than to get the discouragement away.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I just thought, we did something kind of cool that, will help kind of level the playing field a little bit. And I think some people who may, be discouraged or prone to think, oh, well, how come I don't have that? I don't have that at birth. So instead of doing something about it, I'll complain about it all my whole life. We'll help quell that obstacle for a few folks. So pretty happy about that.
Can you expand a little bit on that of what you did, Jeff? I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So what we did was I'll say a fairly sizable mask donation across the board to the New Brunswick education system, because we have a really good quality mask and it looks really good. And what I didn't want is for the students who, had our mask versus the students who had kind of crappy surgeon's mask with like a few holes in it because it's being worn too long. I wanted, instead of being like, oh, I can tell whose dad knows Jeff, I wanted to be like everyone in the school system, designer mask across the board.
Nice. Everyone gets a designer mask from Jeff.
Yeah, well, I gave them to the school board how they use it, but there's enough for middle school and up, every single one.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, and can I ask in a deeper question as to why? What was the driver behind that? It was just because you love kids, or was it you wanted to be able to provide and give? What's your reasoning behind that?
Yeah, well, it both of those things, right? Is that I didn't want, I wanted, rich kids and poor kids to have the same quality of mask, and I do like kids, and I, I didn't want it to be one more thing that is kind of like a negative that sets in teenagers' minds, like, oh, those guys, they have this, but we don't get this, Yeah. Because I think that type of negativity early on in the mind is what causes a lot of people to sort of pursue paths that are unrewarding and ultimately not good for anybody.
Yeah. And, in reflecting on our conversation today, Jeff, it's and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's almost, you want to give them the opportunity, whoever it is, right? Let's say all the kids, right, to have their 007 suit on, right? You give them that moment where you uplift them and you give them that energy, and right, and they can believe in themselves, and therefore, go and take on the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now here's the last question of the day here, Jeff. So you are the all-wise sage goose on the pond, right? You have your orb. Tell me, right, what if you were to predict the future and paint me a picture about your golden pond? What does that look like?
Is that about my business, or is that about the whole world?
That is an open question. Where do you want to take it?
Yeah, so difficult to predict the whole world right now, which puts me in a difficult situation because an entrepreneur sort of needs to see where the puck is going and try to get ahead of it, right? As in the world trends. I'll start with an interesting thing that's happening in clothing. Is, when COVID first started here, everyone's like, oh, great, everyone's gonna be wearing sweatpants for the rest of their lives. Like, the entire clothing industry is done, right? Imagine how many people texted, me ridiculous articles like that. One thing that's been super interesting that I've noticed, our Fredericton store, right? And we simply wear a mask, but our Fredericton store is maybe busier than it's ever been. Okay. Oh. Now, our Waterloo store, for folks who don't know, we had just opened our store just before COVID started. So that was just classic, like, pulling out of the parking lot. Yeah, so that was tough, but it's starting to really, really ramp up. And I think actually that a lot of people, a lot of people found that they liked working at home. A lot of people found that they did not like working at home. And a lot of people got over the whole sweatpants thing. And actually a lot of people are like, we're getting a lot of people buying suits right now, right? A lot of people are actually buying formal clothing, which is sort of shocking compared to all the news reports that you heard about, and every clothing company is filing Chapter 11 and this and that. Yeah. So super interesting to see, and I think it sort of proves my hypothesis of, like, on some level, people understand the transformational power of clothing. They understand how important it is, even just for themselves, even if they're just sitting here on Zoom calls, right? So what we've been going actually in a very business casual direction for a very long time, right? Especially since 2010. I do wonder. I think that we might be going in a little bit more of a formal direction, which I think if you ask most people in clothing, they'll tell you, like, that is the dumbest prediction I've ever heard. Okay, I think for another year or so it'll remain very, very, very casual. But I think we are starting to see, just like everything is pendulum swinging, right? And I think we're getting pretty close, right? Obviously, COVID just amped up our business casual and our athleisure trajectory so fast. But and I think we've like hit the tipping end, and I think you're going to see a lot of people starting to dress just a little bit more sharply, almost like not knowing why. And then in 5 years, it'll be like, oh yeah, after COVID, everyone wanted to dress up, and that's why we all. So it'll be interesting to see if that plays out. I think from a retail perspective, everything is going to be very experiential, right? I don't think that you're going to go into stores and the employees are essentially order takers, right?
Mm.
Like the people who work at stores are going to be like, have a really good level of attention to detail, really socially proficient, and actually really good designers. I think everybody's going to be jumping on custom, even if it's not fit, even if it's just arranging patterns, this type of thing. I think custom is for sure the future, and I think you're going to see like the retail employee. There's not going to be like kind of like your mall retail employee. They're going to be very, very slick, and that's something that I've kind of thought of since the start of this. So I train my guys to like, dude, you are not retail. You are this whole other thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that when people shop, it'll be incredibly experiential. Otherwise, they would just do it online, right? And pretty soon your computer's just going to scan you, have all the measurements. We'll look at a little holograph of ourselves and turn them around upside down. Oh, you look with a shirt on the back. It'd be super awesome, right? So the game of the average person in clothing is going to have to skyrocket, which is going to be super cool. But the in-store experience will be just next level, right? Yeah. And that's what we try to do in our stores, and we're just going to have to keep upping our game, because it is going to be an experience to buy clothes. And I think that you'll note in the 1800s and prior, like people would just go to one tailor, right? And it'd be, Warren's Fashion House, Jeff's Fashion House, and they get all their stuff there. And then we went to, actually, it's only, one of the things that's interesting is our memory only goes back, it tends to go back like 20, 30, or maybe 200 years, but just in terms of all issues. But now we have a disaggregated thing where we go to the mall and I get my shoes from store 1, my jacket from store 13, and my cufflinks from store 87, right? It's going to be none of that. You're going to go to one person who you trust, and they're going to have an awesome experience. And the more they know about your wardrobe, the better the service they'll be able to provide you. And eventually, because we'll have like a virtual closet of your closet, right? Because like when people shop with us, like we have such a good database on your clothing, like it's crazy. So as you come in multiple times, like like what we can put forward to you in terms of suggestions is so good, because it's not just like a line item that says, oh, you got this like Hugo Boss jacket, you got these shoes. It's all very picture based, right? And we can put it right. And so we can build. So I think you're going to see these excellent experiences start to emerge in the retail environment. I think you'll see formal clothing coming back into the mix. And I'm not sure about the rest of the world. Like prediction wise, I hope there's a vaccine, by the way. I really hope, I super hope there's a vaccine. And it's tough to know anything else.
Yeah, there are so many. It's extremely unpredictable. So that's really fascinating that you want to go into that. When you talk about that, a really experiential shopping, experience, and for where I buy my clothes here in Regina. When they'll text me and they'll say, hey, we just got this in, we know it's you, right? Yeah. I like, wow, like who does that, right? Yeah. So you're obviously there already. So I truly appreciate that, because it saves me the time actually going down there and shopping, or they got a pair of shoes in and they'll say, hey, we just got these in, we thought of you, hey, come and check them out. And of course you buy them, right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think we can get more of that, where you can customize and tailor to that individual, right? And create, you're not just shopping, but you are having an experience. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. You won't, like the key, like you will never feel like you're shopping. Yeah. Like what a guy's like, I hate shopping. It won't feel like that. It'll feel like you're talking to a trusted advisor who handles this part of your life, and you're glad that he does, right? And he's fun and awesome, and like we'll text you when something for you is there. So there'll be other aspects. It's just tough to know with COVID and all this stuff. Like in our business, I've got this idea, the Danger Tour, which I've done a little bit, but I I really want to make this like macked out road show where I just like, have the huge freaking trailer, go speak at the conference. All right, everybody who's in, like we're measuring out here, like that type of thing. Because then once we've got you in once, you can then order online, right?
Right.
Very easily. I mean, people get shirts from us online all the time. But I mean, that if you've met us, we measure you, like you're for sure going to be doing it all the time. So, but tough to know just how business is going to go over the next year for sure.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Great idea though. I mean, go to the conference, you speak, your trailer people, and who wouldn't? I mean, and yeah, as a guy, right? Like I hate shopping. I really hate shopping. Right.
Yeah.
So therefore I go to your trailer. I'm not shopping. Right.
Yeah.
You're just, you're giving me what I want and everybody's happy.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Perfect. So if you see the goose behind me, and actually you can see there's actually one of my shirts actually in this painting.
Yeah, no, it's super cool.
So, seeing this, Jeff, there might be a bit of a challenge here, right? We might have to come up with something, right? That's going to be like super dangerous, right? That'll pop. We got to talk. We'll talk after the show.
Totally. Oh, that'd be great.
So I want to, I really want to thank you for your time today, Jeff. I truly appreciate your story. I appreciate the fact even, just what you're doing to better the pond. And that's what this whole thing is all about. And, doing the things for kids, helping individuals, again, they're becoming their 007 because of your experience, right? You're passing it on and you're giving that ripple effect. So I appreciate that. Where do we go to find you?
Super glad you asked that question. So jeffalpaugh.com, guys might have a hard time figuring out how to type that. Just Google the world's most dangerous dress shirts, right? And if you put that into Facebook or Instagram, you'll find us, right? It's Jeff Alpaugh Custom. But if you Google the world's most dangerous dress shirts, you'll find the website. If you put that in any social media, you'll find us. And that'd be a great place to start. If you guys wanted to follow us on Facebook or Instagram, I'd really appreciate that. And that's where you get a little bit more of what we're up to day to day, new styles we're dropping, all that kind of fun stuff.
Right. And the masks as well, which you got available too. So.
Oh yeah.
So obviously.
If you want to dip your toe into it, a great place to start is the mask, of course, because you need a mask.
Yeah.
You need a mask. But another great place to start is the socks, right? And we have a great sock of the month program. You'll look at it and you'll say, these socks seem a little bit expensive. That's because they're really freaking awesome socks. Like they are, I wear them running to the gym. I wear them in jeans. I wear them in my suits. They are they're like a performance sock, but you can wear them with everything. And of course, they look very, very stylish. The sock of the month, it's an amazing thing to either get a friend for Christmas or get for yourself. You can imagine how many people text me every month, like, oh, what a wicked sock I just got. It's nuts. It's awesome.
That's perfect. I'm all about the socks too. So you can only have so many versatile socks, but I'm sold. Sold. So,
all right, good. Well, thanks a lot, Warren. I really appreciate you having me, and make sure you let me know when the episode airs.
Yeah, I will definitely get it out to you. We'll send it out to the world. We're going to I'll hit up my flock with it, and hopefully you'll share as well. So there you have it, folks. It was a great time with Jeff Alpaugh, the world's most dangerous shirts. This is Warren Barry flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Warren.